Firstly, I'm going to come back to that Manchester Met thing. That's going to come up immediately, so watch this space. I'm at Cambridge. First thing you'll probably notice is that there is a proliferation of identities. My orchid is there, my hashtag and my handle. I've just tweeted all the slides, so if you want to follow along, then please feel free to. It's a slightly trimmed down version, but not hugely so. I'm also not going to use the other mic because I'm suffering from a cold, so apologies. Right, so Cambridge. I haven't got an obligatory institutional slide. Cambridge has been around for a long time. There's lots of people, I think 5,000 researchers-ish. There's about 350,000 rows of publications in symplectic. So it's a big amount of data. Cambridge also has a very strong focus on academic freedom, an exceptionally stronger than any other institution I've worked in, of which there have been 4 so far. So this is very much the carrot-only approach. We do not have sticks. That will not be true for all of you. This is our mandate. So a little bit about where I am, what I do. I am part of the research information team. There's 3 of us now, recently, just gone up from 2. We sit in the central strategy team, and we're really responsible for making the data that we are required to report on work harder for us as well. If we've got to do it anyway for compliance reasons, why not get something useful out of it for us? That does include things like research fish exercise, it includes REF, it includes, to a certain extent, HESA, but it also includes a lot of freedom of information requests, which come up far more often than you would like, but they're always quite interesting. The crucial thing, though, is that a lot of people have mentioned already today, this is designed to be frictionless. We don't want the recording and the reporting requirement to impinge on practice. Our whole focus, again, is about making sure that PIs and researchers have time to do research. They don't need to be in our systems that much. So, just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is roughly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about research information. We have loads of metadata about all of these things, collected to a lesser or greater extent, comprehensively. Mostly a lesser extent, obviously. And it's not big data. I mean, they're sizable databases, and there's lots of elements to them, but it's very, very wide. And this really is a humanities problem. So it's really interesting that, the humanists come forward on this, because this whole idea of research data for a humanist, I have texts, I have critical theory, and the rest of it is post-its and my ideas. And at what point does my idea become data? And the answer is usually it doesn't at all. But without having that conversation, or at least communicating that message, there's very, very good reasons why there's paranoia knocking around in arts and humanities right now. So let's think a bit more about those researchers. They do want to do research. When they want to do research, they get faced with a whole bunch of questions by an institution. And the list just keeps on coming. And it always ends with, does it have any impact? And once you've finished all those questions, you ask what the next thing is. And then you ask again, will it have any impact? Impact is something that's really, really badly defined, in my view. It's very difficult to understand what it is we're going to do about it, so at the moment we're doing everything we can. Again, with those provisos of not impinging on academic time, not causing the requirement to report to impinge on practice. So all of those questions that are there, you could feasibly conceive of a statistic to calculate off them that could give you some kind of measure. And I guarantee you that within a department, let alone within an institution, let alone across 2 disciplines, these things will not generalize. They just don't. It's all very local. So, we are concerned about the tail wagging the dog. We don't ever want to calculate something that is going to be misused, and if we're going to communicate it, we're going to communicate it very, very clearly and communicate, crucially, its limitations, which I will try to do throughout what I've done. So it doesn't get taken up very swiftly and used for something for which it is completely inappropriate. Like I said, we only have carrots, so obviously you guys need to consider whether you have carrots and sticks, whether you just have carrots, whether you just have sticks. We found that there's elements where you can have a stick, like EPSRC compliance to an extent gives you a stick. Exercising that stick usually costs a lot more than it gains. So again, we're back to carrots. So what can we do and what should we do? So these are the 4 questions that I'm going to base the rest of what I'm talking about around before I show you precisely the architecture of Cambridge. And the first one is, what is a KPI in the context of research? and there aren't any, is my rough response. The game changes so continuously. I've got a quotation that, if you will indulge me, is from a Reith lecture from 1970, and I think it really demonstrates the reason why they don't work. We're not in a context of risks that we can calculate, which you can make metrics off, that you can then work out what the precise response is. We're in a situation of uncertainty. So, by uncertainty, I don't mean risk, which is a probability ratio that we all know how to handle, particularly captains of industry. But uncertainty is a situation of more information than we can handle. If we're playing poker, for example, and you have a queen and ace showing, and I have 2 aces, and it's stud poker 7-card draw, we know how to calculate the odds. If, on the other hand, I arrive on a desert island and it's quite dark, and I see a girl standing there who seems rather suspicious to me, and there's someone sitting opposite me and there's a bulge in his pocket, and he has a queen and an ace, and I have 2 aces, and I hear a strange noise, and the lights dim, then I'm in a situation of uncertainty. And that is essentially ref. I mean, can you see any parallels? It's a little bit terrifying, okay? We know the rule's going to change, because we already have. You look at RCUK's data policy. It is diverse, I think it's safe to say. So yeah, it is an uncertain world, but it's a growing world, and you can see from the number of companies here that it is growing as well. So, moving on from KPIs, how sure are you that you're measuring what you think you're measuring? Well, this is really tricky. Generally speaking, you can't be. In a former life, I was an economist, and we used to say that all models are wrong, some are useful, and that kind of holds. We know we're going to get it wrong, but we also know that we want to generate insight. If we get an answer to a question that is counterintuitive or that isn't working for us, and doesn't lead us to a conclusion that we can actually action, then it does at least help us frame the question we should be asking. So that's roughly how we use analytics. The other thing is that I've put down here some of the terminology that's come around, these words that are frankly horrendous. The idea of impactfulness, refability, and the new one fresh from last week, EPSRC compliancy. I'm really strongly hopeful that we'll have luck with this academic because they're very EPSRC compliant. That is precisely all of the things that we're trying to avoid. That is making researchers concerned about a whole vocabulary, a whole framework that is irrelevant to doing research. It's only relevant to reporting. I'm not saying they're not accountable to anyone. What I am saying is it's not helpful for that accountability to inflict any kind of pressure on them, really. We want to see world quality research. We want to do incredibly well in REF, obviously. We want to be competing with Stanford. But we want to do that. To do that, rather, we need to get hearts and minds, not functional, operational things. Okay, so once you've finally come up with your measure, are you going to present it fairly? So this really demonstrates that point quite well. I'm not sure if the scale's rendering, but the axis is truncated and starts at 90. So 5% think no, 95 think yes. The reason I put that in is because quite often you'll make a really nice shiny analytics dashboard or a really nice shiny analytics anything, and someone will see it and go, oh, that's nice and shiny, and then it will go off to a meeting, and then the meeting will get progressively higher, and all the context that has been provided with it will go. So that's why I'm very, very cautious about the things that I calculate, and I am given the freedom by my management team, who are fantastic, I have to say, to be able to push back on the metrics. If they ask me to calculate something that I think is inappropriate, then we'll have a conversation about it. Usually I won't calculate it. And I think it's actually really important that you have that idea in your information team, that they have the confidence and the space to do that, because we're all here to get a good result. We're not here to, again, influence in those negative ways behaviour. Right, this one again comes back to the humanities. If a measure is biased, which all measures will be somehow, they will favour someone, are there ways of creating measures that counterbalance that bias? And if not, are you asking the right questions? And this really, really, really does come down to generalising to the humanities. And I'm going to go back to another XKCD cartoon, which is obviously meant to be satirical, but actually satirises itself, I think. So mathematicians look, scale loads of gap between them and the less pure physicists, and similarly to chemists and so on. Where are the arts and humanities there? Everything that has happened throughout the last 10 years, it seems, has marginalised arts and humanities. And it's really, really frustrating because they've been left out of the conversation. And they've partially done that themselves, and I'm not defending that. But what it does mean is that now our great leap is to make sure that we're actually providing them with something that's useful. Because if we don't provide them with something useful, then why would they adopt? And if they don't adopt, how will they comply? And if they don't comply, what are the sanctions going to be? So, yeah, scientocentricity, I really feel for you. That is exactly the problem. Research data management. Where is the data? I don't know what data is. Why would, no. This is silly. Data is what? Facebook? No. It doesn't help. And as soon as they get alienated, if you've got that lack of engagement, then this is often a one-shot game in terms of getting those people on board. So be really, really careful about it. Also, don't use impact factors because they don't work. Nothing has shown that journal impact factors, any journal level metric, just no. So, right. And there's actually a lot of documentation which I've provided in the glossary at the end that you can go and look at and see that. Yes, the things that I think are important, you need to provide insights. You need to make sure that its context is there and it's difficult to remove. PDFs are good. And you need to be aware of its limitations. And make sure that you've communicated those to the people to whom you're passing any kind of metric. DORA is also important. DORA is the Declaration on Research Analytics, which came out of San Francisco. I think only UCL signed up to it so far. It's worth having a statement on. At least cast your eye over it. We need to do that. That's on our to-do list. But essentially, it's to make sure that the analytics end of stuff is not being done without any governance at all. This is optional. It's entirely optional. But it did also lead to responsible metrics, which you can follow the link on the slides that are available, which will take you through to responsiblemetrics.org. And they have claimed that they're going to be providing a prize for the most egregious misuse of metrics on an annual basis. So this is one list you don't want to be at the top of. And Jane Tinkler's at the Parliamentary Office for Statistical Stuff, so it has a technical title too. But she's got the presentation, which is also very useful, and she's agreed to let me share with you, so do help yourself. So, making it work. That is really, really nice and compellingly emotive and emotional, and all the good reasons why we should do these things. It is incredibly difficult to do in practice. You guys have much more IT experience than I do, and frankly, trying to get all of this stuff in and make it work, and then make it reusable and make it lean on each other is a nightmare. So I'm going to show you how we've done it. And also, we've got a lot of digital science products at the moment. I'm not here to advocate for digital science. It has worked very well. There are other offerings. I'm sure you're all aware of them, Pure and other things like that. So yeah, how do we avoid this situation? And one of my colleagues was very helpful in making a tube map. So this is fabulous. So elements, we use symplectic elements. It is based on different elements, which is why it's called elements. Everything is pinned to a user. That is the focal point. If you can't hang it on a user, it will get orphaned and it will die. Publications was the starting point. I've got another presentation which takes the arts and humanities, and if you look up that scale of all of those amazing sources of information, none of them apply to the arts and humanities. So make sure you've got a strategy for populating arts and humanities data. I would advise getting your head around, well, getting someone in situ with a good knowledge of Zotero and a good knowledge of the researcher's research, because it's actually incredibly readily doable. I did, as an example, I'm a former medievalist as well. I did 4 searches on each of 20 researchers and put in 1,000 entries in an afternoon. So it is really readily doable. Once you've got your users and your publications in, which you can do with the HR feed as well, you can do professional activities. We haven't used this too much yet, and teaching activities, teaching at Cambridge is not centralised, that's the word. It is very much not centralised, so we're not going to try and get involved in that too much. It's there if you want it. It's on. Feel free. Grants. I don't know if you guys have got some fairly eccentric financial systems. Ours have been through a huge period of change, and they are improving all the time. But there is a lot of data cleaning to get it in, so bear in mind that is a big task. And then REF happened. REF just appeared at the top. So ref made this really imperative, and we originally got symplectic for ref, and then immediately after ref it generalized, so we're going to use it going forward. Yeah, I'll just keep going, I think. So these imports, EndNote, Google Scholar, MLA BibLink, this is where it's starting to improve for people who don't just write articles and immediately put the preprint up. And altmetrics, which I'm hoping to come back to, but I'm a little bit tight on time. Altmetrics is fabulous because it gives you all of that engagement stuff immediately. So again, just go and have a look. It's Twitter, it's all the things that you can see up there. You've probably all heard of it. And it is really actually very, very helpful. It's not impact. And that keeps coming up. It's a nice to have. It's a really nice to have because no one doesn't enjoy Googling themselves. But it's still at that point. So we're trying to work out how we're going to leverage that to make it work harder for us as well. We've now got the reporting database on as of Monday, which is a massive result. So we can run CVs off on our live instance, sorry. We're also hoping to make it so we can actually provide a lot more useful stuff to the people who need to be able to do stuff in departments. This has obviously raised a huge amount of permissions questions, and right now the administrator is me, so it's going to be a big job. But there's useful stuff in there to help, so yeah. And then open access, open data. This we're still working on. This is very much a work in progress. Yeah, it's complicated. It is slightly frustrating at the moment that the number of things with which we have to comply and the extent to which they don't agree with each other is huge and proliferating. Right now we think we've found a route that will allow us to conform to the letter of everything, but we want to be conforming to the spirit, and that takes decisions outside of our institution, more from the sector. So we would like for the spirit to be more conformed with itself, so that everyone's getting a result they want. That is quite frustrating at the moment, but we're working through it. So we will at least conform. We hopefully won't get sanctions. That's that. We must not get sanctions. And then we've added dimensions, which is a source of already delivered funding. It has some really, really nice tricks on it, with particularly around semantic searching. We're not sure yet. This is all after the fact stuff. We're not sure the extent to which we want to make it prospective and how we want to interact with the systems. I also look after research professional. We're not quite sure how we're going to, whether we're going to and how we're going to prompt academics with funding bids as they become available. Crucially because we don't want to interfere, and because there are embedded people to do that. But also because it comes back to that adoption problem. If you set up any system, however smooth and reasonable and helpful to use, and every time you start doing something, just think of the paperclip in Word. It's exactly that. You don't want something popping up saying, it looks like you're applying for funding. You know, this is not where we want to be, because no one's going to appreciate that. So, yeah, we have to do that in quite a sensitive way, and we don't have a good answer yet. Okay, so that is the very complicated systems architecture that we have at Cambridge. You can see there are a lot of links to a lot of things. That means it takes a lot of work to maintain, and we are very, very helpfully supported by our central computing service. I don't think they enjoy getting phone calls from my office, not going to lie. But that is roughly what we think we need, and it doesn't cover everything, but it's a really good start. Oh, and we've also got public profiles. We're going to start pushing it into Vivo, we think. We're doing a pilot project with Vivo right now, which is Vivo is an ontology that you can populate from a CRIS, so it allowed us to do a big upload and become, I think, in the top 10 most populated Vivo instances in a week, which was amazing, but we're not using it yet, so it's still pilot, so yeah, I'm not sure we're going with that one. But what does this actually mean? It means that we can have an interesting and useful conversation about our research, social media impact, and comms strategy. Right now, that's actually happening on a department-by-department basis and a college-by-college basis, and we're just there basically saying, celebrate your research, and we can provide you with a really nice way to do that, with weekly, daily, monthly, whatever updates you want. Whatever you want to do, that's cool by us. Data's there, please use it. A publication strategy, that is entirely miswritten. We do not have a publication strategy. It is not our place to consider strategy of publication. It does mean that within departments they can have an informed discussion about what they're doing about REF. But that is the limit. We do not get involved. Hefty compliance, we've already talked about that. RCUK compliance and grant capture, again, I've talked about how we haven't quite got to the point where we're using this prospectively, but we will. Academic workload. So that would be something that in former institutions I would say would be considered as a way of checking that everyone's working hard enough. That's really not what it is at Cambridge. This is a way of making sure that all that research time, that number keeps growing. Just make sure that number keeps growing. If they've got time to do it, they'll do good stuff. That's our strategy. And then provide shiny things. So this is where the final, I promise, step comes. So I've been basically mining this data for a year now, doing lots of network analysis on how researchers work with each other or don't, how fields and disciplines emerge or don't, and how interdisciplinarity, what that means, how it's useful, whether it's not a goal in itself, completely agree, but whether or not it can be helped along. Essentially, what we're very concerned about is that administrative structures are impinging on researchers' capacity to communicate with each other. So if we can provide them a way outside that or around that, then that's what we will do. This comes from a poster which is also online. If you go to my Figshare account, you'll be able to get to it very quickly. And this is the really shiny outcome. So everyone was thrilled with this when they saw it. What this is every research collaboration up until March in the University of Cambridge, highlighted by our strategic themes. So we've got 12. So each yellow thing is a different research cluster coming up. Down here is sort of clinical medicine. It gets a bit more STEMmy as you go around. And if you look at the periphery, the nice big galaxy of blobs, that's everyone who doesn't work with each other. So again, you could look at that and go, why aren't people working together more? What I looked at that and said was, why is this not measuring the thing that I wanted to measure? Why is it the case that I am massively underplaying all of the really good and interesting work that is happening in the arts and humanities? Well, it's because I have no way of capturing it. So I'm now working with researchers to work out ways that we can help them capture it. And this means giving things that are ephemeral DOIs and starting to track them through, again, through Figshare, through metrics, and trying to work out in real time what's happening so that they can be reactive to it. It's not trivial, but again, this is about not marginalising them yet again. Finally, I have a glossary and loads of links. So again, if you go onto my Twitter profile or go and grab it, then it's all there. Thanks very much.